All right, happy Friday. This is going to be a real fun time. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things today. The first thing we're going to be talking about is obviously, market stats. We're going to be talking about what's going on specifically in the villages in Florida. I've got a special guest today, and I'll introduce John in a minute. One thing I do want to talk about, something that's going to be, is basically been on my mind, that we created this nice little report, this Q3 report here, that basically has a lot of the stats that I talk about on a weekly basis. Sales volume, year-to-date sales, prior year sales, close price to list price. Which way is the market going? Is it going up, down? Are we crashing? Are we not crashing? So that's something that I talk about a lot, but I have that in hard copy form. So if you are interested in getting that, you can call me at 352-572-3796. You can also put in the chat that you would be interested in getting this. You can text me, call me, whichever. So this is a pretty cool thing. We can send this to you either by email or send you a hard copy. So John and I were talking recently about what's going on with the market, what's happening. Like, and a lot of people are asking, like, could it get worse? Is this the darkest time in real estate in Florida? Could it get darker? What other things could happen? And so we're going to talk about that today. So without further ado, John Dean is my guest today. He's an attorney, real estate attorney in Ocala and the Villages, of course, does wills, trusts, probate, and a lot of different things for sure. But John, welcome.
Thank you, Glenn. Happy to be here.
Well, good. So, one thing that we're seeing, and John obviously owns a title company, so he knows this. I mean, one thing that we've seen, I want to tell you this, guys, because you know this, over the last 3 to 4 months, we've seen a real downturn in the marketplace. Obviously, last year being an incredible year, and the early part of this year, very, very busy. Then, of course, with the rise of interest rates early part of this year, and steady rise, it's been, inventory has gone up. The number of sales have gone down. We've seen, I wouldn't say a market crash, but we've seen some significant movement downward in pricing. And what we have seen over the last 2 weeks is actually a very, I would say, an average market, meaning we've seen the same amount of properties going under contract as we've seen come on the market. So that's actually very encouraging news. Some of it might be related to the elections done. Some of it might be related to the interest rates did go down just a little bit last Friday, but we've seen more traction, some positive traction in the marketplace. But, John, what's your take on all this?
Well, you've hit on the high points, Glenn. That is, the Fed is driving the economy. And when the Fed decided that the inflation rate was too high and they needed to take action to try to take some of the air out of the inflationary bubble that was going on by raising interest rates, the result of that has been to cause a cooling of this real estate market for most areas. Even in the Villages, which is generally thought of as being recession proof and inflation proof, there's been a slowdown in our title company action that we've had, and I know that my clients are talking to me about things that they are trying to examine and look at in their budgets and in their expenditures to make sure that they have the necessary funds to continue to live the lifestyle that they had hoped to have in their retirement years. So it's putting pressure on everybody, and I think that when we look at the new home sales and the secondary sales and the new home starts, to see that reduction, it's caused by interest rates going from 3.5% when a person could afford a $400,000 home, and now the interest rates are at 6.5 or 7%, and they can only afford a $280,000 home with the same kind of monthly payment. And so the question is, where can they get, or what kind of home can they buy for that reduced valuation? And they're not satisfied with the homes that are in the market in that price range, and the $400,000 home that they thought they were going to look to buy has not come down in price sufficiently to meet their expectations on pricing. So that's where you're seeing it. The good news, I think, is that With COVID that we experienced in 2020 and 2021, and still in some areas it flares up here and there, many Americans have found that they did not need to make those long commutes into big cities to work in office high rises, that they could work from home, or they could change careers and jobs and find something that was a little bit more their liking without the necessity of doing that travel. And for those people who could work from home, the realization that, home could be anywhere, could be in Florida. It doesn't have to be in Pennsylvania or New Jersey or New York. If I can move to Florida and work from home, I'll save 9 or 10% on my state income taxes, and I'll live in a better climate area for sure, and enjoy the lifestyle that we Floridians have come to love so much. So I think that will continue to go. But it helps explain why we're experiencing 850 to 900 people per day moving into the state from all over primarily the north, but also from the west and other places as well. And in Marion County, we see a number of people that are relocating, migrating up from South Florida because they're tired of the crowded conditions down there, and they want to come out to Marion County and the Villages area where lifestyle's a little bit easier and slower, and the pace is better, and this is a fine place to live for sure.
John, I want to talk to you about that. So it's interesting. One of the biggest surprises, I'm not usually surprised by anything I see in real estate because I'm paying attention to it on a daily basis more than most people. But this has been something that's been a little bit of a surprise. But then when I dug deeper and thought about it some more, maybe there isn't. But one thing I did see is that the Villages seems to have been affected a little bit more than the outside areas. I thought that the interest rates, we knew interest rates have been going up, and the Fed has been talking about the interest rates. The rate between banks is going to go up, and hence 10-year Treasury bonds and the yield's going to go up, and obviously interest rates are indirectly affected there. But I thought that Marion County and Ocala and the outside of the Villages area would have been more affected than the Villages, because the Villages typically is, cash, and we know that from the title company, and at least 50 to 60% of the business that comes in is cash. You might have a different number of the title company, but you would think that they're not as affected by interest rate, but it's been the reverse. And then I thought about it, I was like, okay, why is there more of an impact in the Villages? Because when you go back to 2008, 2009, the Villages wasn't as affected. We saw a ton of foreclosures in and around the county, in Marion County, the country. But the Villages only went down 15%. So why? So I think, okay, stock market, right? We've seen some things around the world. What are you sensing? Because you work with a lot of seniors. You create a lot of wills and trusts and that type of thing. What are you seeing? What's your take on it?
Well, I think you hit it on the head when you talked about the stock market. Everybody's 401k and IRA has taken a significant hit in the downturn in the market from October a year ago to the present time. And so when people are retiring and moving here from up north, and they're looking at their portfolio, and their portfolio is down 20-30%, they still want to retire. They've still made the decision, we're going to retire, but now they have to look at, because we don't have so much cash as we thought, because our portfolio is down, we don't want to sell and take these losses, then we need to arrange for financing. And of course, the interest rates are now double what they were a year ago, so that's putting a slowdown on that. So I think that helps to explain why people are being a little bit more cautious. And you're right, back in 2008 and prior, probably 60% or even more of the buyers in the Villages were cash buyers that we saw. I don't think that's necessarily the case today. There's a few more buyers that are financing, and I think in large part because the cost of construction have gone up 20-30%. The Villages has added more areas that they're developing down in South Sumter County, and those homes are at a higher price on a per square foot basis than the ones that they sold in the past decade. So everything's relative, and I think if the decline in the market, the increase in the interest rates, and the increase in costs caused by inflation have caused the villages to slow more than we might have anticipated.
Well, and you know, it also makes me think about, okay, even with the price reductions that we've seen, all the gains have not been given back. In other words, 2019 pricing evaluation is still significantly lower than where it is today, even though today's prices might be a little bit less than what we saw back in the spring.
True. You're right that the valuations have jumped, in some cases, double what they were in 2019. But the give back since the Fed has started increasing their interest rate and causing some slowdowns have only been about 20%, maybe 15%. So a double backing off to 15% is still 85% higher than it was back in 2019.
Do you remember there, and I don't remember exactly when this was, but it was probably a month or two ago, and the jobs report came out, and the jobs report indicated that unemployment actually went down. And I don't remember a time where that was actually considered to be bad news, but it was considered to be bad news because, oh my gosh, that means inflation is still going to go up because everybody has jobs. Do you remember that?
I do. And on the other hand, I don't want to sound like a political conspiracy theorist, but I don't really trust whatever the government puts out in terms of their numbers. A number of people after COVID have left the workforce altogether and aren't looking for jobs, so they're not even included in that number for unemployed. If you look at,
but what are they doing? What are they doing?
It's interesting that I don't know what they do. I guess some of them, if they're under 30, are sitting on their mom and dad's couch in the basement playing video games. And if they're over 60, they're signing up early for Social Security.
You know, and it's so interesting because that's one of the things that, you know, I've talked about this in a couple of videos in the past, which is one of the saving graces of this marketplace. And the reason why it's different from 2007, 2008, one of the reasons is we're in a time period where there are so many millennials that are buying homes around the country. And it's very similar to the time where the boomers were buying homes back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I guess that for the millennials that are working, that are not, you know, smoking in their parents' basement, I guess those people, we probably have to thank them for having enough of those people that are actually buying homes around the country.
Well, for them to have the courage to do it is wonderful, and the home experience of home ownership is a great opportunity for them to be a participant in their communities and pay taxes and learn how the real world works. However, they've not gone through a setback, a recession. They haven't gone through high interest rates. In our lifetime, I remember, back in the 70s, if you got a 7% mortgage, that wasn't so bad. That was kind of the norm. And then even in the early 80s, interest rates had peaked up under Jimmy Carter to 10 and 11% mortgages. And it wasn't until Ronald Reagan came in with a Tax Reduction Act and got the Fed to begin to loosen up some of the constraints on money policy that the interest rates began to come down and people got back to work in a more vigorous manner. And that continued for a long, long time. And even after the 2008 mortgage crisis that caused a big decline in our economy and in prices, that was relatively short-lived, about 4 years. And by 2012, all those losses had been recovered, and it was smooth sailing for the next 5 years, 6 years until just recently.
You know, it makes me think about a couple of things that I've recommended for folks, which is, you know, how can a seller make the kind of money that they want to make? And we're talking about creative solutions. And one of the things, two things we've been looking at. The first thing is look at, is your mortgage, if you do have a mortgage as an owner, is it assumable? Do you have an assumable mortgage? Your interest rate could be fantabulous and it could give you a leg up and make your home more attractive. But also in something that, you know, we've worked on over the years is owner financing. Like if you own your place free and clear, would you consider holding the note at an attractive interest rate for someone? And I think that could make things very attractive and maybe get you a little bit more money in the home sale or be able to recoup some of the interest. Are you seeing any of that yet?
We do a fair amount of for sale by owner, people that are, and then those that are wanting to try to finance it for their buyers as well. And that can work out good for both parties. If you have a a retiree who is going to maybe move from the villages and move back up to be with their children because they can't live on their own anymore and take care of the big house. So where are they going to go to get a 5 or 6% rate of return on a secured position like a mortgage would give them? And they know the value of their own home. It's just a matter is the buyer qualified as a buyer, and is the down payment significant to make it significant enough to make it worthwhile for the seller to take the risk of doing the seller financing. And if everything lines up well, it can be a great opportunity for both the buyer and the seller to have in-place financing without so much of the costs of having to get appraisals and surveys and all the things that they charge from the lender side, and then from the seller side to be able to get a better interest rate than they would be able to earn on their money elsewhere.
So being joined by John Dean, attorney and also owner of Advantage Title. So by the way, if you guys have questions, this is a great Ask the Attorney question. John didn't give me permission to say that, but I just, John's here. You might as well ask him something.
Sure.
Free legal advice. There
you go.
But yeah, if you want to put it in the chat, if you have questions for John about wills, trusts, estates, probate, whatever, or just in life philosophy, or you want to put that in the chat in your comments, feel free to do so.
We'll just say a caveat: free legal advice is worth what you pay for it.
That's true. We never promised anything else, did we?
That's right.
So one of the things that we had talked about the other day, John, when we were kind of preparing for the show, is the feeling like we may be at the it feels like a pretty dark time, but I also recall, and it seems like just yesterday when we were going through the 2007, 2008 crisis, and this doesn't feel anywhere close to that at this point. Do you think that we're heading into a darker time? What's your take on where the market is going?
Well, I'm not a prognosticator, but when you look at the market as a whole from the standpoint of the Fed and monetary supply and the Fed policies with regard to buying government bonds and financing those expenditures, we have some challenges because with a $31 trillion debt, as interest rates go up, the cost to the United States and to the American taxpayers goes up in order to pay on those bonds. So that's a real absolute cost, and Congress is going to have to figure out how are they going to deal with the expenditures going forward, and maybe this Republican majority Congress can come up with some ideas that might help lead the way in that respect. On the other hand, because the Fed has had several quarters where they've raised interest rates this past year, it feels like they may be getting toward the end of that posture of continuing to raise and allow the effect of these price raises on interest rates to work against the inflation and to slow down the economy. I think there's been some slowdown. We saw the sales reports that came in recently on retail sales that show that there was a slowdown in some of the stores, Target, and other stores are talking about that they're concerned about the Christmas buying season might be a little bit less than it had been in the past. And these types of expenditures that people would normally be making, but because they may be concerned about the cost and concerned about their budgets, concerned about the high cost of fuel for heating in their homes and for gassing up their cars, maybe people are going to slow down a little bit. And that's what the intent of the Fed was, to try to make that happen. But in terms of how it affects real estate, particularly real estate in Florida, I think that you're spot on, that while we'll see a little bit of the air let out of the balloon through the inflationary reduction tactics of the Fed, it's not going to cause, I don't think, a complete shutdown like we had in 2008. I don't think you're going to have wholesale 5 million mortgage foreclosures nationwide like we had back then. I think you will see some increase in mortgage foreclosures. People who have bought homes over the past 24 months and now our inflation is making it tougher for them. Their taxes are going up. Their fuel costs are going up here in Florida. I've seen a lot of 4 or 5 of my clients in the past 6 weeks that have gotten their homeowners renewal insurance premiums, so they're doubling. So it's from $3,000 to $6,000. So as these costs continue to go up, some people may not be able to continue to carry their mortgage. And if there's a slowdown in the economy with regard to employment, that will definitely tip the scale toward more foreclosures and more delinquency. And then you might have some mortgage companies, some banks that are taking property back and wanting to do some short sale. So I have an investment partner that he and I have lined up our cash so that we're ready to buy what we expect will be some homes. We like to own single family homes and rent them out and or rehab them and resell them. And so to the extent that those properties come on the market between June and December of 2023, I think there may be another 10%, maybe as much as 15% reduction in pricing, particularly for those homes that are in financial trouble. If the borrowers are strong or if they have no mortgage, then they should be able to ride out the storm without too much trouble.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I'm actually looking at the 7-day numbers for the villages. Like I was saying before, new listings, 32 new listings the last 7 days, 47 price decreases, which is a little bit higher than normal. The 32 is slightly. That's pretty much been the norm for the last 4 or 5 months for sure. So we're still shy in inventory, still a lot less than where we were about 2 years ago, but we have been climbing a little bit. Pending properties, 32 under contract, new under contract the last 7 days, 26 sold, AKA closed, and that's a little bit light. So I like when the pending number and the new listing number is about even, but it tells you that's kind of where we are, a little bit of a plateauing effect for the last week or two, for sure. John, do you want to talk about, while you're here, we might as well talk about some of the common questions people have, which is, let's talk about trust. Some people ask, should I create a trust? Should I not? Probate is good. Probate is bad. Want to talk about that?
Sure. So many people have information that they get from Money Magazine or their neighbors or the coffee shop or whatever, and they try to think that their estate planning should be done from those resources. And that's typically not a good idea. There are others who think that I always put my kids joint my deed, and that way when I die, they get the property and I don't have to go through probate. So that people try to make decisions based upon avoiding probate as their main motivation. And that's not always the best way to think about your estate plan. Probate does give us an opportunity to have the court oversee the transfer of the property from the deceased person to their heirs, or however they set up their will, their beneficiaries. But more importantly than that is we also get from the IRS a gift in a step up in basis, which if you put your kid's name on the deed, let's say you bought a house 15 years ago for 160 in the villages and now it's worth 380. Well, if you just put your kid's name on it and then you die and they get the house, they got your basis at 160. So when they go to sell it for 380, they're going to pay a capital gain on that 220. But if you had instead engaged in some smart estate planning where the property passes either through a trust or passes through a will to the children, then they get a step up in basis and they'll save the capital gains tax on that $220,000, which at today's rates is about $44,000. And so to make a $44,000 tax mistake because you're trying to avoid a $4,000 or $5,000 probate expense doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But it can be avoided if you implement proper procedures through setting up a trust. That's one way that our clients very frequently use is the trust in order to help manage assets in their later years, and also provide for a successor trustee who can step in to take over if mom or dad become unable to manage their own financial affairs without having to go through a guardianship, which is a legal proceeding in front of the courts to have the judge determine that the person is unable to take care of themselves and make decisions. Now, I might be incompetent, but I sure don't want a judge to sign an order saying I am. I'd rather do it through a private manner, through my trust, and name one of my family members or somebody else I know and I trust to manage my business and my real estate and my financial affairs for me if I'm unable to manage them myself. So the trust is a good vehicle to do. There are other ways to do it. Some people use enhanced life estate deed, also known as a ladybird deed. And this is a way to create the transfer upon your death to whoever your beneficiaries are, your children or whomever you wish. And you have complete control over the property during your lifetime. So if you do change your mind and you don't want to leave it to them, you can do it. As opposed to a regular life estate deed where you give yourself a life estate and you give the remainder interest to the other person, children, for example. And then if you change your mind, you have to ask your children to sign the deed back to you. Well, I've had several cases that we've had to try because the children said, no, I don't want you to have the property back, Dad. You're planning to, now that mom died, you're going to marry this other lady and I don't want you selling the property. I'm going to not let you do that. And so causes conflict in the family. And dad may be going to find another wife because he's lonely, wants to spend time that he has with another woman. That's his business. And the children really shouldn't have the right to interfere with a competent adult's decision. So that's why we try to use the estate planning process to put into place those techniques and those procedures that will help accomplish the client's goals at the later stages of life and death.
So what about a will? It's actually, I've heard some people ask this recently where maybe they created a will 20 years ago. How often should someone update their will?
Well, a will that's properly executed, which has, it's in writing, it's not handwritten, it's a typed will, could even be one of the form wills you get from Staples or somewhere. If it's filled out properly, that's where many people who try to do their own documents get into trouble. They don't have it executed properly. It doesn't say the right things that it should. It doesn't talk about what happens if so-and-so dies before me. So it doesn't contemplate all the different scenarios that could take place. And frankly, if I charge somebody $800 to make them a will in a estate planning package, and I do it properly, they think, well, that lawyer charged me a lot of money for that. But they don't think about how, when the time comes for those plans to be implemented, how they save them tens of thousands if they have done it wrong.
We go through the same thing, John, on the real estate side.
Exactly.
Yeah. We make it look easy, right? But when you make it look easy, it's like, well, you're making a lot of money because you made it look easy.
Well, because your realtor had the contacts and had the buyers, and there was advertising and the reputation of the firm, and all those things come into play to make the sale happen.
So it also makes me think that any kind of lack of clarity, some ambiguity, is really the enemy of like a peaceful transition of property, isn't it? And that goes not only real estate contracts, wills. If there's anything that's unclear, obviously there could be some issues.
There can be, and to answer your question about how long or how often should wills be updated, I guess I didn't finish the answer, which was if it's done properly in the first place and still reflects your wishes, then there could be no need to make any changes. But if you named your brother-in-law to be your personal representative and he's dead or he divorced your sister, you probably don't want him to be your personal representative anymore. So things in life happen where we need to make changes or corrections or make addendums to the wills. And so it's a good idea to have them looked at. Even if you don't want to have a lawyer look at them, it's a good idea to get them out yourself, read through them, make sure you understand them, make sure that they still reflect what your wishes are, And my wife and I just made a change to our estate plan just last week because we had some changes that took place in our family, passing of a member. So we made some adjustments that happened.
I was hoping you added me to your will, John.
we discussed it, and then we got to, oh, should we add Glenn? Oh, no, we're not going to do
that. When it comes to like adding real estate, let's say you know somebody buys something in the Villages that maybe it's an investment property, should they make an amendment to their will at that point, or is the language in the will sufficient to cover?
Generally, the language is sufficient. However, if you say I leave my house located at 125 Main Street to my daughter Cindy, and now you sold that house up in Tennessee, and now you live in the Villages, well, it doesn't really reflect what your wishes are with regard to your current house. So broader language in your estate plan could be helpful. Rather than say I leave my house at 125 Main Street, you might say I leave my home, my homestead wherever located, because you can only have one homestead. And so that might be a broad enough language that will allow you to have a home in Tennessee, and now you have a new home in Florida, and it still goes to your daughter as you planned.
Anything you want to add?
Well, you know, the estate planning process is designed to help people avoid mistakes, avoid complications and traps, and to make it smoother transition when they die and they pass on their property. So there are several different ways to do it, but nobody can really, especially somebody who's not trained in this area, can have a great understanding of all the different nuances. And so it's probably worth your while if you have, you know, more than $500,000, certainly, and probably not even that high. But if you have some money, have some property, and you're concerned about it going to the right people, then it might be worth your while to have it done. Interestingly enough, in most states, in Florida also, everybody has a will. You have the will that the legislature of the state where you live has created for you. And it may be like if you had 3 children, and that's only 3 children you had, and you died and you were a widow or a widower and you weren't married, and you don't have a will, and you want your property to go to your 3 children, well, it probably will. Exactly. It's not going to go to the state. There's no, people don't, I've only had in 35 years one property that ever went to the state of Florida after somebody died, and he was a survivor, refugee from the Nazi German camp in Poland that he was in when he was 7 years old. All his family got killed by the Nazis. He was a loner. He got sent on a boat over here to America. He never married, never had any children. You know, when he died, he had no heirs. And so we had to go tell the judge, there's no heirs for these people. This man, we can't find him. And I told the judge the whole story, and he said, well, how much money has the guy got? He had about $180,000 and worth of assets. And he said, well, I'm not going to let that go to the state until you have exhausted every remedy. He said, I said, well, Judge, I said, I've already hired an international estate search firm to search for heirs. He said, how much did it cost? I said, 10 grand. He said, is there anybody else that does it? I said, yeah, there's another firm that we use from time to time. He says, go hire them and spend another 10 grand. I'd rather 160,000 go to the state of Florida or go to a family member than to sit here and not complete the search. And so we did a second search and still couldn't know. But anyway, the point is that property doesn't go to the state of Florida, almost never. There's always some heir somewhere who will be happy to step forward and say, yes, that was my long lost uncle, and I'm happy he left me all his property.
So, you know, wait, we have to end this way. This is, you know, it's Friday. We got to have some fun. I don't even know if you're allowed to do this. If you're not, just let me know. You can, you know, change the names to protect the innocent. The funniest thing that's ever happened that you can share with us in your experience as an attorney.
Well, I don't know about the funniest one, but how about a sad one?
Okay.
A sad one. All right. So a man and a woman were working together. They worked together in a business, and the business was robbed by a couple of guys who escaped from prison in North Carolina. And during the robbery, the husband and wife were shot and killed. this is horrible, left a 3-year-old girl as their only child. And so we were called by the aunt and uncle, the sister of the girl, the woman who died, and said, my sister and her husband were shot and killed. There's a 3-year-old daughter. We have a 4-year-old son, the first cousin. We want to raise the child and be the guardian. And so we represented them in the guardian proceedings. Well, the father, his people were from Kentucky. And if you think about the Clampetts, that's who they were. They're the Clampetts. And little old
If
grandma.
you're from Kentucky, let us know. Comment. I want to see where you're from.
The grandma of this 3-year-old girl, she was incensed that the judge would even consider giving them to the other side of the family, to the aunt and uncle. She wanted to raise her granddaughter. And honest to God, Glenn, she was about 5 foot tall, about 80 pounds, and was about 76 years old, wore glasses, and she could have been Irene Ryan's, sister. That's the lady who played the character of Granny on the Clampetts, on Beverly Hillbillies. And she was feisty, just like old Granny was. And so anyway, long story short, we were able to show the judge that this little 3-year-old girl would be better to be raised by her aunt and uncle and have a cousin to grow up with than be hauled off to the hills of Kentucky. But it was kind of a funny story how, but the mom and dad hadn't planned for it, and so, because no one anticipates getting robbed and shot and killed in your business. But things happen. Car accidents happen. People get sick with surprising diagnosis. Sometimes violence can occur in a family out of nowhere. So to have your affairs and your estate in order is a wise and prudent thing to do to protect your family members.
That's good advice. So I'm not going to advise everybody to call you if they want to drop their kids off. So don't do that. But if they do want to do something related to wills, trusts, estates, they have questions, probate, whatever, how do they find you, John?
Sure. So we have a website, deananddean.com. My wife and I practice together. We've been practicing together for 35 years, and one day we'll get it right. We want to practice together. But you can go to on our website. You can also send me an email at johndean@deananddean.net, and I'll be happy to respond back if something can. But just pick the phone and give me a call.
Sounds good. John, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.